Recorded live from random secret studios all over the Delaware Valley.
I'm the capo. He's the prez.
And this is Sons of Ben,
The
pod. Well, welcome back to, I believe it's episode 15. Double digits. Almost, double digits of the pod. So, welcome back, Adam. How are you doing in quarantine?
Much like the days on the calendar, all of these shows starting to blend together to me. So the number 15 could be right. It could be 75. Couldn't tell you.
That's true. Well, today we've got another exciting guest. He proclaimed on his Twitter that we were scraping the bottom of the barrel, but I think not. I think we can scrape even deeper than this. But we've got, and please let me know if I get all of your resume correct. We've got Mr. Joe Tansey from Pro Soccer USA, other newspapers, Fox Sports The Gambler, Union Soccer Podcast. Joe, are you delivering for Uber Eats now too, or what else am I missing on your resume?
I haven't gotten there yet. If the quarantine goes on longer, I'll try and become like professional video game player or something like that. I'll find something to add to the resume.
Don't you come from my market, Joe? I've already carved that one out very nicely for myself.
Adams.
Well, I'm exclusively playing like PlayStation 2 games, so I got ways to go up right now.
Oh no, I'm here for that. I want to see someone play SSX streaming. I'll do that.
But so thanks for coming on. Thanks for agreeing to the insane time frame that we now record during the pandemic. And
I appreciate it. I'm glad the trailer in Lot B doesn't have a voice, because that probably would have been your next choice, right?
The trailer
Joe
does
Bendick
have a voice.
picture declined.
Yeah, the picture of Joe Bendick would have been your next pick.
We asked. He wasn't available right now. He's being busy quarantined in Chester himself. So
That may be a future guest though. So no, I wanted to check in. How are you and your fiance Allie doing during all this?
We're doing good, staying as sane as possible. I got, NFL draft stuff that I've been doing, so I've been staying busy in other sports. Haven't been touching too much soccer, but I've gotten used to it now. So I'm trying to figure out what this soccer thing is again, but
I think
it's working out.
Don Garber, people of FIFA, and everybody else are trying to figure out the same question. So, but yeah, I wanted to. I guess we want to first get an idea of your background, because we were joking how many jobs, but you've been all over and around this soccer universe in Philadelphia and especially the Union. So I just wanted to, I think most of our members are familiar with your work, but just want to get a little bit of a background on how you got started and how long you've been involved in this crazy circus called Philadelphia Union Soccer.
So yeah, it was actually before I even got involved union-wise. I was doing stuff for Bleacher Report. So this was way back when they were still like before the Turner buyout. I was doing stuff for them, just like, hey, my one buddy told me about the site, and it's very, like, just lucky that, I ended up kind of in that situation. They got bought out by Turner. They're like, oh, we can pay you to write about soccer. And I'm like, oh, okay. I'm down for it. I was like 22 or whatever, right out of college. I'm like, yeah, please. And then the one day I was like, hey, like, I'm based in America. Most of these guys are based in the UK. Would you guys have any interest in like MLS and national team coverage? And they're like, you know what, we'll give it a shot. And so that's how I got really deep into covering the league from a national standpoint first. And then when their situation kind of changed, I pivoted really back here. I did stuff for newspapers, I guess, for one season, and was kind of in the press box, but not like, that wasn't like my main beat. And then ran into Ivis from SBI in the press box. The one summer, he's like, hey, do you know anybody from the Philly area? I'm like, yeah, me. So that kind of got the ball rolling there. And then when Pro Soccer USA started up, applied there. They hit me up literally like 2 days before the season started last year. No, it was 2 years ago now, 2018 season. And so that's how that, and the podcast kind of started, me, Sean, and Ryan Ellis. We were three to start, and it was run through the newspaper for a year, and then a lot of things changed. So me and Sean have kind of taken the reins with that, and now we're bringing it to the airwaves on that stuff, on that medium. But it's kind of been a winding path. I wasn't a soccer fan growing up. I didn't really, I was a baseball guy. I played baseball all through high school. Like that was my sport. Soccer was in the rearview mirror, if that. So, I think it was maybe the 2010 World Cup. Maybe it might have been '06. I'm not sure like which World Cup it was, but like okay, I'll get interested in this. And like I knew what MLS was, but I didn't really have like a full like grasp on it. And then gradually, kind of grew into the coverage from a national perspective, and then dropped in here. So it's kind of just been I guess opposite of the way everybody else kind of approaches it. Where I came in from a national view first, and then came into the Philly view, where a lot of people I guess start locally and then kind of broaden out. So it's obviously different than everybody else, but yeah, I wasn't. I'm still, when it comes to like in comparison to everybody else, I'm still soccer fresh. Like I think 2014, 15 was when I really started going deep into MLS and the Union. So it's compared to everybody else, I'm still kind of fresh.
So you're saying the Union haven't worn you out yet, right? You're not burnt out. You're raring to go when the season
Oh, all right.
starts.
Let's not go that far. Let's not go that far.
But
There was a stretch from about, I guess, since I started covering the team to about 2018, where it was a grind. I could have copy and pasted the same first 200 words of my stories at least 5 to 10 times.
oh,
So
you weren't alone because as fans during some of those times it was why are we going back to see this again? It did feel like Groundhog Day, but
I think I asked myself that question, and the motivation was I'm getting paid to do this, so I kind of have to.
I think my motivation was, well, I paid my money, I should show up to this. So,
Yeah.
yeah. So
There was
now,
one game, or there was like one stretch, I think in like 2016, where I just remember my girlfriend and me were coming back from a game, and it was like the fourth straight Union home loss. And this very pleasant song is in the background, but my facial expression is just so blank because I'm just so not upset, but just kind of just over the whole process. And she records this video of me just driving very blank starely up I-95 after like this loss, and I was like, that's my Union moment. I'm gonna keep that for forever. When I remember whenever it gets bad now, I just remember the dark times.
Yeah, I mean there were countless occasions where it's like you see other teams in MLS doing this, and that you're like, from my perspective, from a on the media side, it's like, oh, you're signing who?
oh,
I have to pronounce Anderson. What's his last name? How do I spell Aristeguieta? What, like, it was like some of these things were just like the most bizarre, and like when you try and figure out how they came about, it's just like, okay, you got the less talented Wijnaldum brother, like, and you try and write about him, and you're like, wait a second, there's a reason why he's in MLS and he's the less talented Wijnaldum brother. So it's like some of these guys that have come across are just like, it's challenging from my end and a little frustrating because you're like, well, what are they doing here?
yeah, yeah. No, and it's funny because even when Ernst came in and he pulls guys like Kai Wagner out, you're like, is this a joke written by Union Hulk? We get a guy from the second division German. You're like, what? But then you see him play, and you're like, oh my god. So since that's happened, it's been like a new dawn almost. It's been a rebirth in Union soccer, where
It's
even
basically like everything that Ernie Stewart tried to do in the transfer market is what Ernst is doing, but he's succeeding.
yeah,
Because if you look at what Ernie tried to do, he tried to go deep into his reserves. He went into the Netherlands. He tried to go into South America. He tried, in theory, the Jay Simpson signing would have worked because he's a veteran forward and you need that, but it just, it fell flat in its face. So that, I mean, that's really what it comes down to. Ernie had uh, in in theory a good mindset, but it just didn't. Nothing came to fruition. And then with Ernst, he's got the same mindset. He's using his his background and everything about, you know, everybody he knows, but it's working. I mean, it's basically like the United Nations of soccer out in the field now. Between, Glesnes, Martinez coming in, Oravich, I think we all just forgot about. Um, it just works,
Well,
and
e-
it's fun to see when it actually comes together.
even his first, I mean, you think about it, his first signing was Casper, right? But at the end of the
Yeah,
season,
technically.
people were like, "Well, this guy's a bust because he couldn't adjust to the MLS and was injured." And then last year was what I consider his first season. And you're like, "Oh,
Yeah.
this is what we're getting." So it's funny because yeah, you say that like people are down on Wooten right now, and you're like, "How can you be down on him? You don't know what you have yet. We got him in, July or August. I don't even remember. No, that was
Well, I mean,
June.
you look at that as like the guy came off of he was in his off season,
Yeah,
so he had to get to 100% fitness. He had an informed striker ahead of him who wasn't going to be taken off the field, and there were different assets of that team that needed to be out there. Whether you like Fafa Pico or any of the other strikers that were up there. I mean, they had the right to be in the lineup, and with Wooten not scoring, I mean, the ultimate, I guess, sliding doors moment for last season is if that goal against RSL counts, he has confidence and he becomes that number two to Casper, and maybe in the best case scenario he becomes that guy who you count on when Casper gets hurt, and maybe that playoff game's different. That's a huge hypothetical, but I mean that goal not counting against RSL, I think had something to do with his confidence because it was a great strike.
oh yeah, that was his first
But
touch.
yeah, which would have been just an insane script to write about his career here. And look, I don't claim to know what's going on inside his mind, but he's a striker, and you look at the situation he was in. I'm sure confidence had a big thing to do with it because of him getting back to fitness, him being in a new spot. And let's be honest, if you look at the entire history of MLS, how many guys that come over in the summer really have a massive impact? It just doesn't happen because it's so hard to acclimate. So that's why I thought the offseason criticism of Rutan, it's like you don't know what you have. There's not a big enough sample size. I get that you're scarred from the past. There are plenty of examples, Jay Simpson included, where it didn't work out, but you don't know what you have until you see him for a full season. Look, if he ends up failing in 2020, then you can, criticize all you want, but right now it's just basically a bunch of what ifs, especially with him.
Oh yeah, and I mean, and just getting back to the theme, you feel like it's a new day in Union soccer, and one of the things that I find weird, being a Philadelphian, is something that you're involved with. There's actually a sports talk radio station that's actually covering the Philadelphia Union. Do you know anything about that, Joe?
No.
I just wanted to pick your brain on what's it like being that other half of what you and Sean are doing at Fox the Gambler, and
to
being the
me,
only station that mentions the team and has the coach on.
to me, it's nothing different from what we've been doing. So I don't listen to sports talk radio in the first place. So I can't tell you like, I know how little are talked about in the other stations, but I can't be like, here's a specific point, on this day or whatever, where they're like, oh, we're really like blatantly ignoring the team. Like it's never been my preference. I'm more of a podcast kind of radio guy, but yeah, I mean, it's just basically what we're doing, but just in segments every week. I mean, it obviously, has tempered down a little bit now with nothing going on and a lot of focus on the NFL draft, but yeah, it feels like business as usual for us. So I don't. I mean, obviously we use that to advantage to promote it. Like, hey, like we're the only ones really, having players on and all that, and we're hoping for bigger and better things when it comes to that. But when it comes to just like sitting down and talking, it just feels like we're doing a podcast for a 20-minute segment.
Yeah, well, I can tell you as somebody that isn't always catching up to all the pods because we have so many and you try to schedule it in. It's refreshing that I get in my car at 5:30 leave. Well, when I could, leaving the office and driving home, and I could turn on sports talk and go, oh wait a second, let me flip this, and I hear you and Sean and Jim's on or something else. I'm going, oh my God, we're talking about the off season, and so it's a refreshing change than Saul from Souderton or Mike from Manayunk and the cast and crew from, because both stations just blend into each other. So no, it's really nice to hear, and I'm glad you guys are attempting it, and we're all pulling for you that it all works out.
And look, it comes too with the club. You know, they've been since the start more than willing to help with whatever possible. I mean, the interviews that we've done down at the complex that have gotten the most feedback. You know, we did one, end of year with Curtin last year. We've done, the live podcast last year at Yards with Curtin. You know, all these guys have been, more than willing to spend 20, 30 minutes and sit down with us, and the club's been willing to set that up. So, like, a little inside baseball here, but I mean, the relationship we have with the club has been a big factor in that too, because they're willing, they know they know the platform's there, and these guys are willing to kind of open up a little bit. I mean, we've done stuff with like Fafa, and the John McCarthy one was cool because he's a local kid. I think we did one with CJ Sapong as well. So it's nice to kind of I know kind of the backstories of these guys because I'm there at training, and I'm talking with them, and I'm talking with the staff, so I have obviously a better grasp on who these guys are. But to bring that out, whether it be through me writing features on them or doing podcasts with them, I think is my favorite part of the job, because you've seen some of the personalities that have come through here. I mean, there's so many different ones, and they're all unique and come from different cultures. So that's my favorite part, is to just sit down and be like, oh, Jack Elliott, you were your parents are Rangers fans. You grew up in England. You played soccer in West Virginia. You're a fourth-round draft pick. You came here. Like, it's stuff like that that just, like, it really fascinates me about the team.
And Jack is a
Real
way
quick.
better golfer than Sergio Santos. I know Adam can attest to that.
No, well, the Sergio Santos swing is one of the more legendary things that has burned into my memory and I cannot unsee. But real quick, I have this question because as a person who does a decent amount of traveling when we were allowed to do such, I would get into other markets all the time, and I would get to places like, D.C., I'd get up to New England, I'd get down to Atlanta, and there would be a, not like over the top, but a decently strong radio presence. And on top of that, on game day at least, there's a radio station. And I know in the beginning of the union, especially with the saturation of sports in this market, it's kind of hard for them to find airtime or airwaves, but like we're now in year 11. What is it more on the union side? Is it not them being able to find a broadcast partner? Like, what's the reason why I can't get the union on my radio?
I don't know if I can comment on that.
Okay. I figured I'd at least give it a stab.
I will just say we've tried.
Yeah.
When
can't-
when the
I-
book
I
when the
can't
book comes
go-
out, Adam, we'll get into that.
Yeah.
The tell-alls come. I'm really excited for all of those. I feel like the union, even in their first 10 years, are gonna have some of the best tell-all books of any MLS club.
I will just say that since the inception of even the podcast, there have been discussions, whether it be with like the comm staff or higher ups, of us, how do we combine to get more involved.
Yeah.
And it unfortunately to this point hasn't, but there's always potential for something to happen in the future. And you know how smart the people are behind the scenes, and how wiser they've gotten to the market. So I'll leave it at that.
I appreciate your candor.
Yeah. Now in Joe's conversation, he was talking about how you guys did the pod with Jim Curtin at Yards, and you did an end of the year thing, and we actually had Coach on. Was that 2 or 3 episodes, Devin? Something like that. But my question, I think, and I don't think Joe can answer this, is our pod a gateway to getting on the Cooligans? Because right after we did it with Jim, all of a sudden, the pod got picked up by MLSsoccer.com, and then all of a
Major
sudden,
League Soccer, soccer.com.
yeah, Major League Soccer, soccer.com, and then all of a sudden, he's on the Cooligans, and I listened to that episode, and I go, first half I thought it was Adam and I interviewing him again, but it was kind of cool to hear him on a national stage with those guys. So
Can
Yeah, and
I?
if anybody gets a chance to listen to that, go give it a listen because it's actually a really good interview. I think it
It's a
I
really
think it
good
just
interview.
showed like Philly culture, I guess you could say it, like on a when you're looking at it from an outside perspective, and it was just like some of it was similar to what we were talking with him, but like there's a lot of gold in that podcast there.
The national glow up of Jim Curtin has been so fun to watch because you deal with him from a personal perspective, and he is one of the most down to earth guys you will meet. And I know a lot of fans don't see that because it's what happens on the field is all you see. But I mean, the guy couldn't be nicer. He's Philly to the core. He really, really cares about his players, and I mean, I've seen that since I've covered the team, and he's been in charge, and he's kind of matured as a coach, and you see that on the field. You see that now that the chains have been broken from the Ernie Stewart era, how much freedom he has, and how he's evolved as a coach. And it's funny for me because some of these stories that I hear him tell on a national level are things I've heard, years before, and some that I've used it as anecdotes in my stories, and to see it finally like come up on a national level and people realize, oh, this is who he is, and I think obviously it has to do comes with the winning, but I mean everybody's from a national perspective realizing like how great he is too. And this is stuff I've seen, for 3-4 years. I mean, the best story he has is when he talks about his old Chicago Fire days, when Bob was the coach, and I did a huge piece on him and Jesse way back. I think it was the May of last year, right before like there were rumors that Jesse Marsh was leaving and going to Leipzig, or sorry, Salzburg, and luckily it was the last Union Red Bulls game before he left. And I went up to the Red Bulls facility and talked with Jesse about like these stories, and he's like, yeah, in 2001 he almost got kicked out of the his first training session. uh, but some of those stories he has from the old MLS days with like Peter Novak's of the world when he was a player, and I mean you look at that Fire roster, and the amount of MLS head coaches, GMs, executives that have come out of that, it's not surprising to hear the stories of how the culture was. It was it was very competitive from the jump, and I mean he could tell stories for days about the Bob Bradley era there because there were so many interesting players there, and you can see how much success they've had.
yeah, we were trying to, and we weren't successful. We were trying to find out what was a crazier Peter Novak. Was it player Peter Novak or was manager crazier? But Jim wouldn't bite on that bait. But someday we'll get enough beers in him, and we'll find out for sure. That
I
might be in the
can't
tell-all.
I can't speak to the manager part because I obviously wasn't around when Peter Novak was manager, but I've heard stories through grapevine that it was quite the trip.
That's what we've all heard too. But well, someday we'll get that. Let me Adam. I mean Devin, real quick. I guess we got a little bit of housekeeping, real quick, on Sons of Ben news. First,
Yeah.
Joe,
We're
we
a podcast
apologize in
about the Sons
advance.
of Ben.
We usually have a beer of the pod from one of our sponsors. Yards, 2SP, or the Larimer, and you can ask Sean about that because he had his fill when he was in the secret studio with us. But because we're in a pandemic, we can't get that. But we just want to remind everybody that our friends at Yards, 2SP, and the Larimer are all still operating. You can still pick up beer. You can do online ordering. In fact, I think we featured in this week's Knack for the members how you can order online for the Larimer. So I just wanted to remind people about those guys. Just try to support if you can. Try to support as many local businesses during this time. And then the only other cleanup I had before Devin can take over what we're doing is apparently I was on Sirius XM, which I had no idea anything about that, but I was on the United States Soccer Show with Jason Davies, so that'll be on later today on Channel 157. But I bring that
They
up
they
because
scraped the bottom of the barrel as
they
well, didn't
scraped the
they?
Oh
bottom of
my
the
God.
barrel, yeah. But it was funny trying to get that. They were just trying to get the Philadelphia perspective of what's going on with the Union at a national, and they were fascinated about the story of the origin of the Sons of Ben and the culture now with what we're doing, during this pandemic, what we want to do, and our relationship with the team. And you like, man, I talked about that. That's so 2011, but it's funny that people are still curious about it. And so it was a good 20-25 minutes. So if you got the free Sirius, go ahead and give the United States Soccer show a listen. And Devin,
I
that's
gotta, I
that's
gotta
it for my
say,
news, man. Woo!
no, but I gotta say, there's like, I really want to say that that game against LAFC, the fact that it happened as like the last major MLS game before pretty much everything shut down, and it was that good of a game, I think has contributed to this bump that everything has been feeling right now, because like the Union have been not like a derelict, but like they've just been an anomaly in terms of MLS marketing. Like you see them in promos very rarely, if not ever. When they did the new anthem for the MLS, not one supporter of the Union was even in that video when they showed, I think, Toronto 5 times. So it's like, for the fourth largest sporting market in the country, for the rabid fan base that we are, it is so weird the way MLS treats the Union as a whole, as like they're there, and like, and granted they haven't won anything, they haven't done enough to haven't signed anyone enough to move the needle, but it just seems so weird how this large of a market has been treated in this system, and then now you have that one signature game where you got a 40-yard strike from a Norwegian center back no one's ever heard of until this very moment, and you got all of these like interesting, like the Santos goal and like Aronson becoming this wonder kid and all this happening. Then the league stops, and then everyone's just like, that Union game was really good. Let's keep rehashing that for a second. Let's keep going back to that for a moment.
I'll keep watching it. I know that. That's for sure. But
I have not watched a single like recorded sporting event. I know a lot of people like loved the marathons of old games. I see no use in it. I'm just like, all right, well, I know what happens. I've seen it before. Like when I'm a huge college basketball guy, and like I was obviously bummed that March Madness didn't happen, but like I obviously understood. It took me about a day to realize like, hey, there were more important things going on. And when they started playing all the old tournament games, I'm like, I know what happens. I watch these. Like, I don't have a ton of interest. I think the only thing I did was, I think when they re-aired the Red Bull playoff game on PHL, I watched for like 5 minutes just to see like the crowd reaction of the Fabian goal. But other than that, I've actually stayed pretty far away from all the old replays, which I think for my sanity is probably probably the best.
it's funny. I've been guilty of watching the Union Classic games just for I wanted to relive the LA game, and then I really wanted to see the first game that they played at the link because I was there, but I did miss the first 15-20 minutes because like everybody else I got Biden at security and couldn't get in, and I just wanted to see for my comparison to make sure I'm validating my mindset that the product on the field 2010 versus the product now is so different and so much better. But it was fun just to go back and see that. So I was guilty of that. And then I think the only thing I've been replaying is when Premier League Live on Saturdays, I've had it on in the background when I'm doing projects around the house, just so it feels like a normal Saturday morning. That there's like some British person saying some quirky phrase while a game's going on. I'm like, this
You
feels
just need an
normal. Okay,
accent.
good.
The,
Yeah.
the one thing that this is going to force me to do is to get back into the European leagues, because I guess a few years ago I just drifted off. I just didn't have time
Yeah.
for any of it. It's like I have a lot of things going on weekend mornings that are above watching European soccer. So now it's like, oh well, I see the Bundesliga might be the first back. I'm like, guess I have to fresh up on what's going on there, so I have a pretty good understanding when it comes back.
Wait, you're not watching the Belarusian Super League with that's going on?
I watched Australian rules football for about 5 days before that got canceled. That was pretty fun. That's the only thing I've gotten into. I've been
Well,
doing a lot of. I mean, I still have other writing gigs where I'm doing a lot of NFL stuff right now, and I'm doing a lot of radio still for the Gambler. So I'm not really starving for content. I guess maybe that first week or two I was just because I didn't know what was happening. But in the back of my mind, I'm like, I could go a few more weeks because I still have plenty of things to catch up on.
The one game I looked back on, and it's only because I just turned 30, so when this happened, I was freshly 11. Was I did watch Game 1 of the NBA Finals again, when the Sixers beat the Lakers, only because I have a lot of Mandela effect moments from that game, where I think things were happening like that, but they weren't because I'm like a child and it's like it's way past my bedtime and I'm just trying to comprehend this incredible game happening in front of me. So I rewatched this game as an adult, and am I yelling after Eric Snow hits that shot in overtime? Yeah, I am, like really loudly in my apartment at this in 2020. But it's like that was the only old school game that I sat down and I was like, yeah, okay, I'll watch this, because all the other ones I have that similar feeling, Joe, where I'm just like, I kind of know how this ends, and like for soccer, for me, it's like I just want to see the goals. And there's like not a lot of them. So it's like, am I really going to watch 60 minutes of them just kind of kicking it around when I know when the goals are happening and I know what's going to happen? I was like, no. But I will say this, for all of you starved for sporting content, your Philadelphia Fusion, talking about video games earlier, are first place in the Overwatch League at 9-1. I'm just saying, look, you need some content right now. They're on YouTube every weekend. They're all social distancing very well, and they're doing quite well. I just ordered a hat off of the internet, so I'm excited for its arrival.
those guys have been social distancing since their birth. Okay, so
Yeah, man, they are paid
this
a
is-
lot better than I am to do a lot less than I do.
there's so many avenues I can go with that, but I'm going to take the high road on that one. But they're trying to get back
Let me,
to the real sports. Go
let
ahead,
me
Dan.
let me transition. We were talking about old games, so we'll just transition into this part now. So, talking about old games, and last week we were talking about converting fans, maybe whether it be a 4 for 4 guy or a Euro snob, converting them to soccer fans. So, my question for you guys is, if you had one chance to show somebody a full-length soccer match, and you had one chance to convert this person to be a soccer fan, what game are you showing them?
I guess you have to show them the Italy-France World Cup final because that basically turned into a roller derby.
Oh my
Uh,
god! Yes. Oh
Um,
my god! Yes.
I don't know like too many. I guess I'm looking from my perspective because I'm like, oh, what even like hooked me on any of these? I think the U.S. World Cup run in 2010 was one of those moments for me. I mean that Algeria game when they scored, when Donovan scored. Me and my buddy were. So the game was at 10 a.m. Me and my one friend were actually going to D.C. that day because I'm really dating myself. Steven Strasburg was pitching in D.C. It was like an afternoon game against, I think it was like the Royals. So like seats were cheap. We took the train down, and I had him over to watch the U.S. game. I was like, come over, and then because I was huge baseball nut at the time, so I was like, all right, let's go see what this guy's about. It's a cheap day game, we'll get home a reasonable time, and we watched the U.S. Algeria game, and we were like, holy crap, the way that game ended with the goal. I mean, I was gonna watch the World Cup anyway because I watch and absorb. I mean, every major sporting event. I mean, I religiously watch the Tour de France. So, I mean, that's the kind of the depth of my sporting ability. But, and I think that game for sure. From an MLS perspective, I don't know if you can really. I mean, I guess you could put out the Zlatan game, the El Trafico, the 3-3. That was pretty big. I think you kind of just look at anything that has a ton of excitement in it because a lot of people come in with the soccer is boring mindset, and trust me, it is. There have been plenty of games where you sit in front of the TV and you're like, the hell am I watching? What am I doing here? Why am I committing time of my life to it? That would be the Union probably 2013 to 2017.
Echo those
probably,
Mourinho years of Chelsea.
But there are plenty of games out there. I think those two are the ones that stick out to my mind just because there's memorable moments in them. But I'm sure you could go down the list of about 15, 20 other games in other leagues. The Man City QPR games, another one because of the drama involved. But there are so many across the board where you could be like, everybody kind of just has their personal preference.
Yeah, that Man City QPR match was my pick because there's so much around that match that, like, not only what's on the field that in the game you're watching, but there's so many other implications to that game. Obviously, like, you had the Manchester City versus United at the top of the table. That obviously was the main point of that match, but you also had like QPR fighting to not get relegated, and then it ended up not mattering in that match. But like, and then the fact that like United finished their match, and then in the last 5 minutes of extra time, City come out, score 2 goals, and steal it from United. It's just like the entirety of that game, and as long as you can explain a little bit about the background of everything that's going on in that game, and how important that title was for City at that moment, is just that whole match is just absolutely insane.
The match that I have like 2, and I know this is kind of cheating. I have like 2. I actually kind of like 3, but I have like really 2. The one match that I would say, and in a similar breath to what Devin just said about the Aguero game, is like, if you want to just take soccer as a microcosm and just say one-off games, this wouldn't count as much. But the comeback Barcelona had on PSG a couple of years ago in the Champions League, where they scored those 5 goals at Camp Nou to move on in the league after they were down like 4-1 on aggregate. I think that was on that kind of, and it doesn't get that same level of praise because of, we kind of accept Barcelona to do those type of things, and Man City was just kind of getting their sea legs of being like this dominant force going at the time. But I thought just the scenes in Barcelona when the last goal goes in, they're just like, oh my God, we actually got them on aggregate. Because going into it, you're down 4-1 on aggregate. No one goes into that match, even when you're Barcelona, thinking, not only we might tie and go to extras is the best case scenario you're ever thinking there. Not we're going to win this in like regulation. Like we're going to just score and just do and make sure they don't. So that would be my one for like circumstance being one game where you're just like, holy crap, soccer is ridiculous.
Yeah.
I would say for me, I always point to the 98 final, maybe because it's just personally for me, but that France-Brazil final in France, I just think that is, when you see a team win the World Cup in their home nation, that that excitement level, I don't think you can replicate that in anything. Like, people talk about winning a Super Bowl in your city, and I'm like, that sounds good too. It just, I can't imagine, like, the United States hosting a World Cup and then, like, being in a final at, like, MetLife and then winning that thing, that to me just is, like, that's when you realize soccer is a very unique sport.
Yeah.
All right, let me go to the archives here. I'm going to say 1994 Ipswich Town versus Wolverhampton. No, I'm just making that shit up.
I was going to fight you. I was going to find you in Paramount and fight you for that answer.
I really could have gotten serious with you guys and said, like, the 15 Rapids Earthquakes Wednesday 11 p.m. kickoffs that I've had the honor of being on the desk shift for. Those are probably the best. Trying to write even 200 words on, Michael Azira kicking, whichever Quakes crappy midfielder in the thigh and getting a yellow card.
No, if I had to pick, though, and it would depend on the audience. I mean, if I'm looking to try to convert like a bunch of meatheads, you go to the '99 Women's World Cup, Brandy Chastain, like those guys are going to become fans all of a sudden, It's like Kevin Garnett all over in that ESPN commercial.
The greatest sports brawl in the history of sports brawls.
But if I'm trying to get people interested in the MLS, as Adam referenced earlier, I'm showing LAFC versus the Union, that last game, that game, I would throw that to someone and go, "Hey, you love Arsenal, you love, you know, Bayern Dortmund, you watch this game, just watch this
Hmm.
one." And I think you'll be like, "Okay, that's exciting, that's fine." I mean, I would probably pick those, but I guess it would just be more, who's the audience, who are you trying to convert? I think they're they're my picks. So
The LAFC game did make a bunch of my Euro snob friends gently nod. They were like, "Okay, okay, I see it." I said, and they've always said like, my thing to my Euro snob friends are just like, "You've never physically seen your team live, right?" And they're just like, "No." I'm like, "How many games of soccer have you gone to in your life?" And they're like, "2 or 3." And I'm just like, even if the product is worse, don't you just want to be there occasionally? Don't you just want to just like see it happen as opposed to just like wake up at 7 in the morning and then try to catch, Bundesliga? And they're just like, no, I'd rather do that. I'm like, oh, okay.
it's such a
Is it
better
is it too much
product
bias,
live.
not only personal bias but recency bias, to say Tottenham v Ajax Leg 2? Is that too
Yes.
much bias?
Yes, that is the definition of your Tottenham bias right there, sir. Because literally no one, and I mean no one, would be thinking about that game as one of the games you would show to display
No.
soccer to someone who's never watched soccer. Yeah.
You
That's
mean
not the Harry
three
Kane
three straight
retirement
goals
game,
in
is
the
it?
second half to
I could,
come back
there's
and
like the Union did that against New England once. Like I'll show them the four
to
nothing
go to
New
the
England game
Champions
if you
League
want.
final? Come on.
That's all right. A little bit better still though.
Yeah,
It is two clubs that I care about, but like, are we moving the needle with either of those clubs on a national scale?
You're right. You are correct.
let's get back to the present day and hoping that we may soon again once see soccer. It looks like your friend and mine, Joe, Mr. Don Garber, the commish, uh, just got on
I know you say that
ESPN.
sarcastically, but he's actually not terrible.
No, you know what? I spoke to him at the renaming of Subaru Park, and I think it was my first one-on-one interaction with him. Usually the other actions are with, security people and at the draft, but he really is a genuine good guy and cares about, the Sons of Ben as a group and the Union as a team and soccer. So, yeah,
This
you're
is the
right,
guy
Adam,
who
saying
almost
that's
kicked us
sarcastic,
out for
but
chanting during the draft. That guy.
yeah, that guy. Well, that wasn't him.
Okay.
That was the
And we were
security.
just chanting "Save the crew." It wasn't even like we were doing anything deep. But okay.
Luckily, that guy from security's finally a good old Ray retired, so that's okay. But that guy took everything to the extreme. But Don got on ESPN recently and talked about what I'm considering nothing, but like everybody else, looking for content and was speculating on what the MLS is going to do and June 8th and what that means. And I guess I want to get Adam, Devin, and of course your perspective, Joe. Like, and I'll throw my 2 cents. Like, are they going to play in empty stadiums? Are they
Yes.
are they going to play? Will it get rolled out to smaller crowds? Like I mentioned earlier during the pre-show, the state of Florida is trying to do a plan of opening up the state, and of course, tourism is such a big economic driver for them that they're trying to figure out how do they open up the theme parks. And the initial plan is it would only open up to Florida residents. Then, as things got deemed safer, then they would open it up to domestic residents of the United States and then allow international travels later. So, is that a blueprint for sports in America? Would the MLS say, oh, it's a closed stadium, but as soon as our county lets us have 1,000 people in, we're going to let 1,000 people in? Is that like the supporters? Is that season ticket holders? Is that a lottery? What do you think is going to be the solution, or what have you been hearing, or what are you thinking right now is the pathway to getting back to watching live sports?
So sitting here with you on April 23rd, now this could change in 2 weeks, it could change in 6 weeks, it could change in 2 months. That's just the climate we're in. And really, I mean, every day. You unless you are a psychic and can see the future and are a time traveler, you do not know what's going to happen between now and even the next hour. And I that's been my whole mindset throughout. It's like you don't know what's going to happen, so why worry about it? My whole thing right now is no fans. It's too much of a liability for the clubs. It's too much of a liability for the league. I mean, you see the stories of the Atalanta Champions League game. You see the hypothetical if the 49ers had a parade. There's too much risk involved until you have something safely in place to have fans. And it's a little different for MLS because they don't have a gigantic TV deal. The NFL is in good shape with that. The NBA is. The NHL, even though they don't have a great deal, there's still NBC can still broadcast that out to the max because it's live sports. MLB is in the same spot. Soccer, look, I understand how much dependence there is on ticket revenue, and I understand the sentiment. Even back in March before everything got shut down, the union players were like and Curtin were like, we'd rather play in front of a full house than no fans, and that was speaking just directly to the home opener. So I understand the preference, I understand the true home field advantage, but you have to look at the safety first. And right now, I don't see fans for a long time in stadiums just because of the hazard that is in effect. Now, again, it could change in 6 weeks from now. We could say, hey, we're in a safer position, but I'm not going to project on the future. I'm not a scientist. I'm not a higher up in MLS or any of the sports leagues. I'm just looking on what I see, and if I was a fan and they allowed the capacity at the stadium right now, I wouldn't go. And I think a lot of people share that sentiment. Now, I look at it from my perspective, my true perspective, from a media side. I would go if it's closed stadiums because it provides a different perspective, and you can spread everyone out. And if that situation occurs, I'm not watching the game from the press box. I'm going to try and bring 10 different vantage points throughout the entire game. What's it like watching it from field level? What's it like watching from the top row in an empty stands? There's so many different perspectives. That's the way I would approach it from like a writer standpoint, just to kind of give a feel of what the game is like. And the other thing is, these guys have now gone over a month without full training. There's only so much these guys can do on their own. You still have to have 11v11. You need to get back to full match fitness. I mean, you're looking at the longer this thing goes, the more time they're going to need to get fitness back in their legs.
Yeah, and that's
So,
we covered that with Jim, and he actually said that the league, part of the plan that they were talking was, when they say if it's June 10th, that means if that's the first game, they'd back it out 2.5, 3 weeks to allow them to train and get these guys back. That he said the ownership and everyone was in agreement that it would do no good to rush the league back without letting the guys get acclimated. Now, I'm not sure though. Is your situation with the empty stadiums? Are you discounting the fact that union marketing could make a fortune on face masks and face shields and everything, sponsored by Captain Morgan and everything else? I mean, I think you're missing a golden marketing opportunity that the Philadelphia Union Marketing Department would pounce upon, where instead of giving out, a poster, they could give out a face shield sponsored by someone. I think we're fine. We could just go back in there full blast.
I mean, that's the best case scenario, to have everything ready to go. I know when I think it was Wednesday. The Wednesday before the home opener. I was down there, and they had it set up where they had hand sanitizing stations pretty much at every entrance to every section. I mean, they were more than prepared to go ahead with that match with a lot of health preparations increased. So I'm sure that will stay the same. I just don't know if I think it comes down to the legal side, and I'm not versed in that, but I would think, you have to think the worst case scenario. Like, what happens if you open the stands back up and X amount of fans get sick from it?
Oh yeah.
I mean, you could probably sue leagues, sue the club, do whatever because they let you in too early. Granted, there are so many fine details there, but I think that's what it comes down to. You don't want that responsibility not the responsibility. You don't want the I don't know what the word is.
Accountability, responsibility,
Accountability. Yeah. You don't.
Liability.
Yeah.
Your
The
liability. Yeah.
liability, yeah.
Yeah,
And
you don't
Liability.
you don't want that on your hands. I mean, when this whole thing started, my first thing was like my fiance, me and my fiance still live at home, so I was at her house for the start of it. And her parents were coming back from Florida and they're both, older. So my first thing was, well, I don't want to get them sick. And then when I came back to Jersey, I guess a few weeks ago, and our whole thing was like, well, we don't want to get our parents sick.
right.
I'm not worried about me per se because I usually can battle whatever with my immune system, and I'm pretty healthy, and I know how to treat my body. But if it affects older people, that was my first thought. I'm like, well, I don't want my parents or her parents going out anywhere. I don't want me to be a carrier and I don't know. So there's so many variables involved where one person could just set it off like a bomb.
Yeah, and it's funny because you talk about the liability and the responsibility. It's even things that us as the Sons of Ben, the group and the board, we're trying to figure out what our steps would be. So if there's no stadium, do we try to host? You're not allowed in the stadium. Are we allowed to have a tailgate outside for X amount of people, or do we do viewing parties? Is that a responsible thing? Do we do something like a viewing party in a park? So these are all scenarios that we're actually running through just so the members know, and we're going to take guidelines from the local governments as well as the MLS and the union and talk it through to figure out what's the best way that we can still support the team and enjoy this product and enjoy the sport again and kind of get back to some kind of normal routine, but what's the safest way of doing it, because you also have to plan for we're going to have one or two knuckleheads out there that are the people that are protesting without masks, and figure out how do we balance that out. We all want to get
The
back.
good news is that everybody is going to over prepare here.
Yeah.
And I think that's been the good thing from the start, is that everybody is over preparing. The theme is I'd rather overreact than be responsible for more loss of life and stuff like that. So I imagine all the scenarios have gone through the league office, and the one thing I will point out is there's a much larger landing strip for MLS than there is, say, the NBA or the NHL. This is a league where they've played December finals for how many years in a row, and how many of us complained that the offseason was too long this year because the MLS Cup was in November. I mean, obviously the offseason is going to be shorter because of the delay in play, but I think one scenario was floated out September to February. There's obviously the summer situation where you could still pack in multiple games per week. You kind of have to say bye bye to the Open Cup, but
Yeah.
That's the sacrifice you make. And then the other thing you run into is you have 3 Canadian teams. So what happens there? Because if the borders aren't open, it's not like Toronto and Montreal can play each other 6 times and have that count, towards regular season standings, because they're only supposed to play each other twice, maybe 3 times. So even if you do a regional tournament, and I know hockey's running into this now because that proposal came out yesterday, or that idea came out yesterday of doing like the 4 pod cities, is you can't do anything until the borders are clear. You can do a neutral site, but then what do you do with the 2 New York teams? They're not playing in New York. I mean,
Well, they don't really play
that's
in
a
New York
huge risk.
anyhow. Oh, wait a second.
Yeah, exactly.
One plays in Queens. I mean, the Bronx. I mean, Hartford. I mean, I'm sorry. I don't know where they are this week.
We're in a pretty decent situation where if things continue and improve, you could say, okay, you could have a soccer game here because things haven't, thank God, haven't gotten terribly worse in the 6 counties on PA side, and South Jersey, the rates are pretty low. I'm in Burlington County, and I think everything south of us has been in pretty good shape. So, I mean, you could look at different areas, and I think that's what they're doing now is, I think the NHL was like Raleigh, Minnesota, Edmonton, but the problem is where in the Northeast can you play? where in the Northeast can you safely play? And if you're doing, say, a regional idea, just me throwing stuff against the wall, even if you model yourself after that and do 4 MLS pod sites, you do one in Florida, you do one in Texas, you do one in maybe Arizona to take the California teams out of there. But the problem is, where in the Northeast you can put somebody, because this whole cluster of clubs, Massachusetts is hit. Ohio was one of the first states under the lockdown rules. The Jersey and PA have been pretty strict. New York is the epicenter, and then you have the border issue with Toronto and Montreal. So I'm sure these are all logistics that are being figured out at the league office, but it's going to be interesting to see what they do and how they're going to have to regionalize it, I would assume, at least for the majority of play, and then hope that some advances are made by people that are much smarter than the 4 of us combined. And then, I have no problem with them saying, hey, we can start in September, we can go to February, and then back up, maybe start in late April or May. Give the players the allotted time off. I know that messes with a lot of, Champions League and Open Cup kind of goes to the wayside a little bit, but these are all the contingency plans that are possible. I don't want to wait until September to go back out there and cover the team, but if that's the safest way possible, I'm all on board with that. So I think it just comes down to, you can have the players train one-on-one. You can have them train, in groups of 2 or 3 gradually, because at least in the union's perspective, you have 2 full-length training fields adjacent to the stadium and adjacent to your facility. So you can keep them in a contained space. But that's not the case for everybody. Not everybody has everything in one site. NYC FC trains up in Purchase. The Red Bulls facility is, I think, 25-30 minute drive from Harrison. It's in an industrial park in Whippany Park. There are so many other aspects of this where the Union are in a pretty good shape when it comes to trying to be able to get the players back because of the vicinity of the facilities, but not everybody is as lucky.
So are you basically saying, thanks to the pandemic, that we can actually appreciate the location in Chester now?
I don't know about the Chester location, but you can appreciate Rice and Boley for demanding the training fields.
Yeah, so,
I
we're in a
appreciate
good
the
spot.
city of Chester. I do, but also at the same time, I understand exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
In perspective, it's like they are, the way they've done it actually suits them, or puts them in one of the better suited positions, because everything's in one spot: their treatment area, their fields, their stadium. So in terms of movement, and if you look at, even if you bring this out to a league-wide perspective, if you're looking at places that, if you're going to do a regional tournament, Chester could be ideal because of the 2 training fields. You have the stadium. Locker rooms are going to be an issue, but they are everywhere. In the worst case scenario, Chester's actually wouldn't be the worst place to hold a regional pod, just because you have, in the worst case scenario, you can play games on the training field like they have with the DA tournaments and all of this. They've held big events before, like for the rugby, they use the stadium, but they also use the training fields. I know last year that was, that's what they set up for, is 2 training fields as rugby fields, and then, in the stadium. So I'm sure everything's being thrown around at the league office, but if you really need to get the games in, and you need a regional pool site and an area where, hopefully the cases decrease, and I don't think they haven't exploded, at least in the Philadelphia metro area. Why not, if you're throwing out possibilities? Because nobody else in the Northeast can say, hey, this is what we have in a lower risk area. You're not playing games at Red Bull, you're not playing games at NYC, you're not playing at Gillette Stadium. So, if you look at what's going on in the region, it wouldn't be a bad idea.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, Devin, you know what? Before we end this, I need you to play that music.
You're the jerk of the week. You're a jerk and it's your week. You really outdid yourself like a crazy super jerk. You're probably a big jerk every week, but this week, you're the jerk of the week. Oh yeah, you're the jerk of the week. I'm looking at you, buddy.
Devin, thanks for playing that. That's one of Adam's favorite tunes. Adam, what do you describe that as?
A banger and a
That's
classic.
banger.
A classic.
So we should explain to Joe. We've got a segment called Asshat of the Week where we find somebody that had just asinine behavior on social media. Usually it's Union Twitter, and we call that person.
Let's say
out.
you guys just have to go to Union Twitter or NYCFC fans for that
It's
bait.
pretty much just to Union Twitter, and we don't want to call that person out by name usually because we don't want them then trying to outdo themselves and win the award all the time because it really isn't an award. But this
they
week,
Man,
can-
you guys are really taking the attention away from Jonathan Tannenwald, aren't you?
Look, man, we've been farming his tweets for weeks now, and it's been a fun time. But eventually, the well dries up.
but we
You've been Oh man, if you've been farming his tweets for weeks, how long has that taken you?
good amount.
have you dedicated 5 hours of your day to
We've
that?
got a lot of time on our hands.
This is what we have the
in a
interns for.
pandemic, you can find yourself with a lot of time.
I mean, look, as quarantine activities go, I think that would be like well at the bottom. But hey, to each his own.
I've finished all the puzzles.
But this one is unique to this week, so it's not really Union Twitter, but it's one of our beloved. And Devin, do you want to read this, and then we'll let the person respond?
What do you want me to read here? What are we reading?
Either one, or I can give the background. I mean, you tell me.
Well,
what
so
you
the,
want.
the
you
original's
need to- I
gone.
feel like-
The original has been deleted.
You probably should give them context, like where
Yeah,
this
we
is
need some
before
context here.
someone just has a random 420 tweet written.
So Monday
aloud.
was the unofficial holiday 420, and the guy Adam Richmond from Food versus Man versus Food gave a little shout out to the holiday, and our very own Adam Booth had a response to Mr. Richmond's tweet celebrating this valued holiday during the pandemic. Devin, do you have Adam's response?
Okay, so Adam's response was pretty. What's the word?
You don't have to qualify
Not-
it. You don't have to qualify it. Let them know.
all right.
Let them know.
We'll let him know. Man versus food makes much more sense now. Pretty
Pretty straightforward. Nothing.
nonchalant.
Yeah.
Yeah. Nothing bad about that, right?
Did you get responded to, Adam?
I did. I did get responded to by Mr. Richmond.
What did
Here it
A-Rod
is.
have to say?
Nice try. Not gonna disrespect my restaurant hosts or my film crew by being unable to work.
Okay. I'm not. Look,
He's a blood doper.
Look. There's a couple ways I'm gonna approach this.
Look, as an avid Tour de France watcher and knowing all about blood doping and that was Icarus, the documentary.
Yeah.
It seems like you do have a Lance Armstrong situation on your hands, Adam.
Look, I'm just saying, man, that Mr. Richmond has come out as not necessarily an advocate, but someone who is friendly to the product. And he was on a food eating competition for which he had to stop because it was giving him health problems. And probably some anxiety as well. And I'm not trying to make light of any of these things. I'm just saying this is literally what he was doing as a profession. I make a kind joke about the gentleman who posted his own image of himself blowing out smoke and holding spaghetti and a meatball on a fork. I said, man, versus food makes more sense. Now, is that a joke? Yes, it is. Is it a joke that is at his expense? 1,000%. And I accept all of that role and responsibility. Do I believe Mr. Richmond might have taken my light joke a little harder than I was expecting? Maybe. But in his defense, I'm sure he's been inundated with similar jokes of that caliber for weeks now, and I think he might have just met his end game. He was already over it.
he's a big soccer guy too.
I've
Well,
heard
he
that.
won't be coming to the Union games now. Thanks, Adam.
No, if anyone alienates more guests per capita than me, I want to know. I am the king of making sure everyone hates me before we get on this podcast.
Aren't you guys still waiting for Jason Kelsey? I think you have to, I
that
think Adam Richman's further down the list if you guys are shooting big here.
Yeah,
We're
Kelsey's
dangerous.
management. Kelsey's management hates me as much as Adam Richmond's management hates Adam. So, but
Well,
Adam, I do have a question.
Yeah.
Is a side effect of weed getting butt hurt? Is that listed on your medical marijuana card? Like you could be butt hurt by using this
it
product?
honestly is supposed to help cure butt hurt. I don't know where it lies on the list of the medical. Like it's around anxiety and like Crohn's. It's butt hurt, and it's like you're supposed to help this, and it's like no. I mean, look, I'm not gonna bemoan it. 420 is a weird day. Maybe he's coming down. He's a little agitated. He didn't get his nap afterwards. It's fine.
Maybe we
life
should
goes
tweet
on.
to Adam Richmond from the Sons of Ben Pod and
Oh, please
see
don't.
if we can get him on for a little man versus food cookout.
So
We'll have him at the
I
tailgate.
literally got off of Twitter before we started doing this podcast, and I only got back onto Twitter to promote this podcast, and I fell down rabbit holes since then. I've hopped off the wagon, I've fallen off, I've got back on the drug, I'm chasing the dragon again, and it's a problem.
You're like
However,
Bubbles from The Wire, man.
Look, man, it's a problem. I'm trying to get some help for it. However,
It's just general life advice to just stay off of Twitter.
it's such, and I was there. Look, man. As soon as I got out, they pulled me right back in, and I got blocked so far this year by all of 97.5 The Fanatic, which they unblocked me eventually. But they were for a good 5 days. I was blocked by the entire station. I was blocked. I've been blocked and called an generalized asshole by Marcus Hayes, and also
Takes one to know him.
What's up? Oh, yeah,
You said it
no,
takes
but-
one to know, yeah.
I know. I've been blocked by Marcus Hayes. This has been me and Kevin Kincaid got into it several times. I've been not good. I've been too spicy on Twitter, and I need to chill out. But I thought my 420 joke was fine.
For what it's worth, I don't think I've blocked anyone. I think I just mute Tannenwald every once in a while. So if you want to, you have an invitation to hop into my mentions. I usually don't respond.
Yeah.
So you're kind of just screaming to the abyss. But if you
I
got
will use you as my
take you want to fire,
soundboard.
if you want to take a, or at least like DM me and say, here's a take I'm about to fire off.
Help me.
Look, I'm willing to help you with bad takes. I'm a king of just bad takes. If anybody's followed me on Twitter, so I'm all for it. I'll be your support system.
I definitely need help because if there's anything that brings me down, it'll be my Twitter fingers.
And Adam, let me just give you a little preview for next week's pod. This is going to be really good for you because we've secured one Jamie Lynch Jr., the morning show producer from 97.5. So he'll
The
be able to
first person
explain
to
why he's
block me.
blocked you.
He
so
was
this,
the
next
first
week is
person
going
to block
be
me,
next week is
specifically.
we don't even have to write content. This is just going to be.
I'm not even gonna show up. What do you think? I'm just gonna sit here quietly in the background. Like I'm just gonna play Overwatch the entire time while y'all have this podcast. I'm like, I will say hi. I will make 3 offhand jokes, go on 1 digression, and then never talk again.
Yeah, I don't see why you guys are worried about content. You guys are doing a lot better than others.
My God, look, man. Here's the thing.
People want to be part of the train wreck, Joe.
Can I get on the Cooligans? I'm just saying, man. Matt gets to go on Sirius XM radio. Curtin gets the bumper goes on the Cooligans. I'm still here. Can I get some Cooligans? Like, what are we doing? Can I get at
We're
least
getting you on
someone's-
Man versus Food.
That's what I'm saying. I'm getting on the Man versus Food podcast. Can I get on Rachel Bonetta's podcast? What are we doing here? Like someone use me for content.
That's the Philadelphia Union front office. You're on 95, remember? That van.
No. My voice, not my beautiful face.
Although I worry about their content. I mean, at some point, how many jerseys can you make? How many wallpapers can you make?
Yeah.
I mean, they've been going hard. Credit to them, but at some point,
They
you got to
still,
be like,
they still have an
you
ace
know-
up their sleeve. There is a photo of a young Tim McDermott after he won a Toys R Us
Oh
suite
my
that he
God.
said he was going to release the picture to us, and he hasn't. So they still have 1 or 2 aces up their sleeve. So don't worry. I think Union content still. If you see the Tim McDermott with his mom jeans standing with the Toys R Us mascot as a child, then they've jumped the shark, so to say.
there was a time about 2 or 3 years ago where you could make the case Jeffrey the Giraffe was probably a really good transfer prospect for the Union.
I would take him in the box.
I think
I would
I think
definitely
he
take it
played
to
in the Swiss
I
third
think-
division. So yeah.
I think he would score more goals than Aaron Wheeler.
That was the exact comparison I was about to make.
I thought you were
It's
going to
like-
say Andrew Wooten. I said, give him a chance. He's going to
No, man.
score.
I think we can make a direct MLS comparison to Jeffrey the Giraffe and Aaron Wheeler. That is the content you have been waiting for.
That is not fair. That's a
60 minutes
product
to
of
get.
Towson
craved
University.
I craved that content. Thank you, Joe, so much.
Do
for
not do not dismiss an alumni of Towson University. Not on this pod, sir. And on that
That's
note,
good.
I think
On
we should
that note,
thank.
you've really
Yeah.
reached. Yeah, you've really reached the bottom of the barrel
We're
now.
talking
You had
about
it. You had it with me at the
Maryland-based
start.
colleges. There we are.
And now you're comparing the Toys R Us mascot. I think somebody on Union Twitter will end up doing a Twitter thread on comparing retail mascots to strikers at some point during this quarantine.
We-
but
we-
I'll stop
We
there.
still
giving
haven't, they still
content.
haven't done jerseys. They haven't compared all 7.5 jerseys this team has had yet. They haven't done the Union players as babies yet. They got 5.5 more things to do. I hope they can get through May.
Oh man. Well,
Hey, I got breaking news here before we end
Oh,
it here.
no.
Just got, La Liga clubs have been told that football matches in Spain will be played behind closed doors until 2021.
Oh shit!
I think
I'm
that's
sorry,
another.
Curtis.
That's what we're gonna do, but we really don't know. So we'll file that.
And I
under-
also have another breaking news that UEFA
UEFA.
ruled out league cancellations. So there's that.
Ruled out.
There we
league
go.
can't-
We're
so
just-
what- so wait, leagues can't cancel? Is that what they're saying?
I guess they're just not allowed.
You're
to,
not
but,
allowed to cancel now. That is the most FIFA thing or UEFA thing.
Qualification for next season's European competitions can only be based on sporting merit in 19 to 20 domestic competitions.
Well, I
So
mean
there you
that is fair.
That's
but,
fair, yeah.
Yes.
I think that's the last thing I'm worried about right now is how the UEFA coefficient relates to
The pennies. Wait, I got one. But here's my only question: as a person who follows many European leagues, I'm like, A, does Liverpool win? Are we just giving it to Liverpool, or are they just avoiding this? And if so, is Liverpool going to burn the hell down when they do that?
Yeah.
Because they're like, no, we were champions for 7 months. What do you mean?
Devin, every time I try to wrap this up, it just keeps going, man.
Yeah.
Sorry. I just look.
I
You
thought
brought up
we-
another topic, and I'm like, I actually have questions. I'm sorry.
That is
I thought
Devin's fault.
I gave you guys a pretty good ending point with the Jeffrey the Giraffe transfer
I
market.
I drug it
Here's
on
the thing:
there.
Devin can totally cut the last 7 minutes of what we've been saying and
Yeah.
just leave it at that too. So there's that
Oh
option.
Lord. Well, before Devin reads any more breaking news, I'm going to say, Joe Tansey, thanks a lot for being part of our little train wreck, and we're looking forward to having you in the secret studio when we're all allowed to be face to face, and we can get some beers into you and get some better stories out of you. A little bit more hard hitting stories that you don't want to comment on, but you will have to.
I don't know how many there are, but I'm sure there are a few.
Sounds good, gentlemen. Everyone out there, stay safe and wash your hands.
Wash your hands.